episode of Surviving the Survivor, we bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And usually we're right on time. There seems to be a glitch going on with the software, which is the reason for the delay. So apologies. Now it appears two of our three best guests are here, but we are talking Diddy. There'll be a second show tonight at 7, which is going to be very interesting. Got 3 reporters from inside the Delphi murder trial, which, of course, is not being televised. They've been there the whole time. It's former CNN anchor Susan Hendricks, who wrote a book about the case called Down the Hill. She's going to be joined by Lauren Mathias, the co-host of Hidden True Crime, and a former TV news journalist and a current TV news journalist in Indiana who's been covering the trial. Gavel to almost gavel. The defense rested today, and the state finished their rebuttal. So it looks like closings are going to happen tomorrow in the Delphi trial. But if there's one case that's probably being talked about more than Delphi, it would be Sean Diddy Colmes, and it's the case that never stops giving. Some of the latest news, which already now is maybe a day or two old, but Miami Beach, after New York City did this, they revoked the honorary key to the city of Miami Beach for Sean Diddy Colmes. And while this campaign was going on, Jennifer Lopez was getting grilled about her former partner, Diddy, and refused to answer questions. The investigation has intensified with over 120 lawsuits, either filed or on the verge of being filed. And here to discuss all this and much more is a New York native, Melba Pearson. She has called Miami home for over 20 years. After receiving her undergraduate degree at New York University, she completed her studies at Hofstra School of Law, which is now known as the Maurice Dean School of Law. And she's a civil rights and criminal law attorney. She works at FIU. Chris Davila, he's a first-time best guest. Let's give him a warm welcome. He is the owner and chief consultant at Semper Blue Consulting. He's a retired captain with the New York City Department of Correction and New York State, I should say, licensed private investigator, a certified anti-money laundering specialist, and the list goes on. But he can give us some details about what it might be like inside of MDC, the notorious detention center where Diddy is being held. We're also scheduled to be joined by someone named Andrew Cherkasky. He's a former federal prosecutor, a military veteran turned high-profile criminal defense and civil trial attorney. He's got 2 decades of experience. He's a very well-known, high-profile attorney, and hopefully he will be here to kind of give us the perspective from the federal prosecution side of all of this. As there is every day here, and I'm just going to kind of fly through this, but now there's a new resurfaced video of Machine Gun Kelly. I have no idea who this guy is. I think he's a rapper. He was just a clip from him on a podcast called Hot Ones has resurfaced. And in that podcast, and I'm quoting here, he's talking about hanging with Diddy. And he says, you get there and he has the biggest suite in the Palms. I guess it's in Vegas. There's waterfalls in his room. There's an effing river in his room. He said, we're going to go out. What followed was an all-out party marathon. It's New Year's Eve. This effort takes me to 9 effing clubs in one night. 9 clubs, 30 bottles a spot. That's 270 bottles. The festivities didn't stop there. And Machine Gun Kelly admits he never saw Diddy sleep. He said that they did not sleep for 2 days. So just yet another party story to pile on to the already huge pile. And of course, here we go. Andrew. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Great. How are you?
Great. Thanks for joining us. Please meet Melba, a fellow attorney, and Chris Davila, former corrections captain in New York City, in New York State.
Great to meet you guys.
Yeah, so we are. Thank you for being this first time for both Chris and Andrew. Appreciate them both being here. One final bit of news regarding Diddy from today is his Instagram, which has, I think, tens of millions of followers. I should have probably checked that. It has been inactive since he's been incarcerated, but now his son, a guy named King Colmes, says he is going to reactivate it and will be posting family type information on there. I'm going to keep the guests muted because I'm getting a little weird audio crack here. I'm not sure. Chris, I think it might be coming from you, so I'm going to leave you mute. Chris, I'm going to mute you, and then when you'll talk, you can unmute yourself, I think, when it's time to go. Actually, Chris, let me start with you here. So, you've dealt with high profile inmate safety and all of this. What is going on right now at MDC regarding Sean Diddy Colmes? I mean, what is his treatment like right now?
Well, whenever you get a very high profile person in custody or inmate, I'm not sure of the current vernacular. I know in New York City, they no longer use, I'm retired now, but they no longer use the word inmate. They refer to them as PICs, or persons in custody. When a person in custody comes in and they're particularly high profile, a lot of special arrangements are made. I'm not saying special treatment, but special arrangements. There's a determination on where that person will be housed. Oftentimes that person is housed separately or in a more secure environment. They may not necessarily be in the general population because of their fame or their notoriety. They're classified based on the nature of their crimes, their age, possible gang affiliations, a whole host of things. And then they're placed in housing units that, in theory, are meant to keep them safe so that they can exist and go to their trial, attend their trials and get back safely. Sometimes protective custody or special housing units, as the federal system calls them, are chosen or mandated. Sometimes the judge will say this person will be in protective custody, and we, as the secure facility, have to place them in environments that will keep them safe. Sometimes, based on the nature of their crimes or the nature of the news coverage, there may be a person placed one-on-one. An officer will be there constantly. In New York City, that's how they do it. In the New York City system, oftentimes a person will be placed one-on-one to ensure that they don't injure themselves, commit suicide, or some other self-harm.
Yeah, and I've heard. Yeah, I heard during direct observation at one point he had another inmate that was actually charged with watching him. I'm gonna mute you, Chris, while you're not talking, because I think that audio pop's coming from you. But let me just get myself straight here for 1 second. So, Andrew, there's a lot going on kind of the federal side of this, which is obviously your wheelhouse. So let me pull this graphic up real quickly here. Get this comment out of here. In a letter to Judge Arun Subramanian, filed Sunday, this is the latest motion, by the way. Colmes legal team, led by attorneys Mark Agnifilo and Tenny Garagos, requested an immediate gag order that would restrain extrajudicial statements by potential witnesses and their counsel following what they described as a deluge of improper pretrial publicity that is undermining Mr. Colmes' right to a fair trial and the integrity of the grand jury proceedings. So it's important to note that they had asked previously, I guess, for some sort of gag order, and it was denied. But now they're essentially saying, hey, we want to restrict what witnesses can say, and we'll get to why in a minute. But I guess from a macro perspective, just your take on this from a federal perspective and just a response to this notion that they want to now gag any of these witnesses?
Sure. So when looking at a gag order in a criminal case, there's different layers of who it applies to and how the judge can essentially execute that. We heard a lot about that during the Donald Trump New York fraud criminal trial 6 months ago or so, and saw kind of all of the battles that went on there. There is a constitutional presumption that essentially is against gag orders. So you really have to have a legal necessity to do that. Prosecutors have certain guidelines that are based on their ethics and what they can and can't say. Same with defense attorneys. It gets more confusing when you get into witnesses. Witnesses, typically, it's more difficult to gag them on what they're saying to the public. And oftentimes, defense attorneys particularly like those extra statements because it gives them more room to potentially find contradictory or contrary statements and impeachment type evidence here. This case is very complicated when you have both the federal side of things with the criminal case going on, but you also have attorneys like Mr. Busby out of Texas, who's trying to create all of these extra civil lawsuits that are going on and using all of those civil lawsuits to make money, right? And so how that affects the federal criminal case and who has priority, there's a very delicate dance that's walked there. Typically, judges are not going to gag witnesses, but this case has so much media interest that I think that the defense team here makes a solid point to say that this is too much. There's too many, there's kind of too much going on here. We need to have focus on this trial and assurance that the jury is going to be untainted.
Okay. I appreciate that. And I want to circle back to you sort of on an inside baseball question, because I just cannot believe the amount of discovery in this case. I think I in the last show, I think I said it was 9 terabytes. And I think someone corrected me and said it's 90 terabytes, which basically whatever it is, it amounts to like the Library of Congress in terms of video, text message, and all this. So I want to get back to Andrew in a minute about how we deal with that. But on to Melba, who has not had a chance to speak yet. It's been a wacky day so far, but hopefully all the kinks are out of the software and we are good to go now. So this request for this gag order, Melba, really came about because of one grand jury witness in particular who reportedly testified either last week or a week before. And I've got another quote on that, which I'm going to pop on the screen, and it's right here. This again from Diddy's defense team. Over the past several days, a grand jury witness and his attorney have given multiple interviews, including outside the courthouse immediately following his apparent grand jury testimony, making false and outrageous claims, including that the witness possesses videos of Mr. Colmes involved in the SA of celebrities and minors. I mean, the minute this little press conference, media scrum, gaggle, whatever you want to call it, happened, all over, every paper, a digital outlet, were reports that there's going to be celebrities outed. This is arguably going to be the most high-profile case since O.J. Simpson, and might be bigger than that. I mean, how do you keep people from talking here? And is it a fair request, you think, to keep this witness silent?
So first off, there's the First Amendment, and that kind of governs everything that we're talking about here. Here in America, currently, we still have freedom of speech. So in terms of a criminal case, like Andrew said earlier, prosecutors have very narrow requirements. Basically, they can only say certain things in terms of what they plan to do with the case. Basically, they're sticking with what's publicly available. They don't comment a lot. Defense attorneys tend to want to say more to basically start to litigate their case in the court of public opinion. So low key, they're trying to taint the jury. Let's be clear. But in this particular instance, I don't think a gag order would be appropriate because of the fact that this is a matter of great public importance. This is the type of situation where you're seeing more and more survivors coming forward because they feel emboldened. Let's remember, Cassie filed the first lawsuit back in December of last year, January of this year. that opened the floodgates. Then little Rod came out. He had a lawsuit and made more allegations. And now person after person is coming forward saying that they were assaulted by Diddy. And so now this is creating a groundswell and it's emboldening more survivors to come forward, which is incredibly important, especially in terms of the evidence gathering aspect of this. They may have additional videos on top of the 90 terabytes. They may have additional corroborating stories that are going to be very important in terms of the U.S. Department of Justice moving forward in this case. And there may also be state charges as well, because now we have people coming forward that say they were assaulted as minors. And depending on where it happened and the law of that state, there may still be an opportunity to file state charges with regards to that. So I think that this is important from a First Amendment perspective, as well as from a justice perspective. Now, super quick in terms of the jury tainting aspect, guess what? Unless you live under a rock, you know who Diddy is. The question is, can you put aside his fame and listen to the evidence that's been brought forth in court and follow the law as presented to you in court? And secondly, that you don't have any preconceived notions as to a verdict. So in other words, you're not coming into this thinking he's absolutely guilty, or you're coming into this thinking he's absolutely innocent. You're going to come into this with an open mind. So that's how other high profile cases have been handled. And I anticipate the same happening here.
Interesting. The fact that Diddy recorded everything will be his downfall, poetic justice. Someone was asking me today, it was actually Rob D'Amico. Steve Cohen and I had lunch with him, and he was asking me a little bit about the Sarah Boone trial. He wasn't following it, and he asked, how did they get the video of George Torres in the suitcase being zipped in there, left to die? And I told him it was the now convicted felon who decided it'd be a good idea to film that on her cell phone. So video obviously can be really damning. I'm going to get back to Andrew in a moment, but Chris, first of all, there's a majority of people here saying that you look eerily similar to Lionel Richie. Have you gotten that before?
Never, but a great singer. I liked him both as a solo artist and when he was with the Commodores. So I'll take that as a compliment.
There you go. So one of the things that you also are very familiar with are these, psych services or psych evals within the correction department in New York State, New York City. There was a report a couple weeks ago that Diddy's having a really tough time, and that he was actually being seen by a psychologist on, more than once a day. So what is the deal with these psych visits, especially for a high-profile inmate like a Sean Diddy Colmes?
Well, for the most part, most very high-profile inmates or persons in custody are mandated to see psych services, or at least the referrals are put in just as a measure to cover oneself, to ensure that because let's face it, I don't know. I'm not familiar with the type of lifestyle that Mr. Colmes lived, with hundreds of millions of dollars and all the things you hear on the news that I'm sure have some truth to it in terms of the opulence and the extravagance. But this is a big, big culture shock for anyone to go from, uber freedom to, wearing, khakis or prison uniforms, eating when you're told to, having to go to certain services. This is a major shock this could be a major shock for anyone. I can only imagine how much more so. I would also anticipate that based on the type of sentences that he's facing, psych services are probably a very integral part of his daily routine, because they want to ensure that he doesn't do something rash like commit suicide. Psych services are often mandated for inmates that may have just returned from trial and may have blown their trial, as the colloquialism is, or maybe have reached received a life sentence, or 50 to life or 30 to life. Oftentimes those people are assigned a one-to-one officer or inmate to ensure that they don't do something rash, and that doesn't mean just killing themselves. It may just mean they have nothing to lose and may perpetrate some other act of violence or some other heinous thing. Psych services are a very important part, I believe, also to cover the back of the institution to ensure that they're doing everything they can to keep Mr. Colmes safe.
Andrew, I read that you're a military veteran. Which branch? And thank you for your service.
Oh, well, thank you. I was in the Air Force. I was a judge advocate and prosecutor within the Air Force.
Oh, interesting. So you were doing lawyering within the Air Force. Jenny Allison here. We'd like to incorporate STS Nation. You see it right behind me, best guest, but we got a better community. I'm very interested to hear that psych experts speak at trial. That will be a trip. I wonder if you would even talk during a psych eval. What about this, Andrew? I mean, can we bet our bottom dollar that whoever this psych evaluator is will eventually be called to give expert testimony at this federal trial? Is that a given?
Well, I've prosecuted and defended hundreds of federal sex-based cases, and in almost every case, you have forensic psychologists on both sides of the aisle, and it's not always just forensic psychologists, but other types of psychologists as well. Some basic kind of education-based psychologists, as well as other kind of more clinical. There's different angles that you can go with it, but psychology is a big deal in these cases, and it works both ways. You know, one, you can try as a prosecutor to essentially create some sort of psychological profile of a serial rapist or a serial sexual assaulter, somebody who is violent in that way. There are some limitations in the rules of evidence that make it a bit more difficult to introduce that unless the person's actually trying to claim an insanity defense. Usually what the psychologists in these cases do are much more focused in on the alleged victims in these cases. From the prosecutor's perspective, you have the psychologist try to explain what you call inconsistent victim behavior, where the alleged victim does something that perhaps a juror might say, oh, well, isn't that indicative of consent? Or isn't that indicative that they wanted it or that they were participating in it voluntarily? And you can explain through those psychologists how that perhaps is not the case and why, and try to educate the jury so that they're not misled in that way. And then on the defense side, to the opposite, that people can form motives and secondary purposes to making allegations that may be less than entirely true, or reframe in their mind an event that happened even days ago or hours ago or years ago that they were that they had one mindset in. Perhaps they were consenting, perhaps they were very impressed by P. Diddy and they wanted to be close to him and in his circle. But later on, as the regret grew and perhaps other potential gains like financial gains grew, that they reframed in their mind their perspective of consent. And so I think in the end, oftentimes it's a wash, and that the effective lawyers that are involved can explain to the jury the psychological elements through basic lay discussions, but the psychologists always play a role, and you will have a battle of the experts here before the end of this trial, undoubtedly.
Yeah, and by the way, we are again covering with courtroom inside the courtroom reporters who've been covering the Delphi trial, and it was the last day or so where a forensic psychiatrist offered testimony about the defendant, Richard Allen. So they're going to help us break that down. That's coming up at 7:00. Don't miss that. That's Susan Hendricks, formerly a CNN anchor who wrote the book Down the Hill about the case and Hidden True Crime. So make sure you stick around for that at 7:00. We're a nosy group here, Andrew. I was thinking the same thing as Jody. Where are you based out of? You seem way too nice to be a New Yorker, New Jersey person. Melba and I are from there. My guess is going to be in the Minnesota area.
Well, it's funny you say that. So I am in New York City. I'm based out of here at this point, but I started life in Wisconsin. So you can catch it in a few of my words that I say. I've got a few of those long vowels in there, but I've tried to do away with those so that jurors don't pinpoint me.
I'm also from New York City, born and raised.
There you go, Chris.
Just to throw that out there.
Well, Chris, that was given, but I love it. I love it. So, hey, we got four of us actually, who all lived and or worked in New York at one time. Melba, to you, and someone pointed out you have another cool ring on today, but here's another quote that I'm just going to read from Diddy's defense, and this has to do with this grand jury witness who claims to have videos showing Diddy and celebrities and minors doing things that no one is supposed to see publicly. And the quote is as follows: "These stories have spread rapidly through the media and created the impression that such videos exist, which is false, and that the government is actually crediting his sensational claims, which is profoundly prejudicial. While the witness and his attorney eagerly spread false and unchecked claims in the media, they have avoided subjecting their claims to verification through the legal process." What's really going on here? I mean, does the defense know for a fact that these are false, or are they just making the case that they are false, but they themselves don't know for sure? What's really happening kind of between the lines here between the feds and the defense team?
I mean, honestly, I think that if the defense knew for a fact that this was false, number one, they could file defamation or some sort of civil lawsuit against him, because again, you're making public comments and you're, making allegations that are false, and it's going to have an impact on Diddy's life and liberty. So there is that option. Is it the best one right now? But it is an option. I think, honestly, that they don't know whether or not these videos actually exist. I think they're trying to do damage control and basically be like, no, wait, keep an open mind, because, this really isn't what you think it is. He really isn't the serial predator. Everybody is lying, right? And of course, forget the Cassie video that we all saw. But I think this is just another attempt to spin and, basically try to plant a seed of doubt in the potential jurors' minds. Because again, all the people that are watching this coverage may likely end up in the courtroom later on down the line as part of what we call the veneer, the larger jury panel from which the jury is going to be selected. So they're going to be hearing these conflicting messages of no tapes exist. Oh, wait, I saw some tapes. And they're hoping that will grow into that seed. That seed will grow into a tree of reasonable doubt. I don't think it's going to happen, though.
Very interesting take. This is one of our people who helps us behind the scenes and from the scenes, every which way. Happy birthday to Abby Crossing, who's not a day over 23. I hope you're having a great day and enjoying it. So there you go. Analytical Blarney, AB, friends of the show. Someone, Joel, missed a mark with Bet Your Bottom Dollar, music theme of the night, Lionel, Commodores. I'm not really a music guy, so forgive me there for sure. Back to Chris Davila in this one. And Chris, you're going to have to unmute yourself again. And apologies for doing that. But so we've also been told that Diddy is in the same housing unit now as Sam Bankman-Fried, if that hasn't changed. Of course, a little crypto bro who had an arena named after him here in Miami. Just explain a little bit, if they are together, what is this sort of solitary but not solitary housing unit like? What is this place that they're
in? Typically when high profile individuals are placed in an area and they may be together, it's because their notoriety, their fame, but also because they require a certain level of segregation and safety. I would imagine with Sean Colmes, there are a lot of safety issues that people have to contend with. And I would argue, and I don't know this for a fact, but if it were me, I would be making it very clear that I need to be protected. I just from what I've read over the years, and I lived in New York for my whole life, for most of my life, you have gang problems that, bad boy records in death row, that whole history from 30 or 40 years ago. There are people that would, I'm sure, love to make a name for themselves, that have nothing to lose, that may want to do something. I mean, you hear all these things from the West Coast, Suge Knight and all these people talking about how Sean Colmes is in a lot of trouble. So I would say that a person like Blankman-Fried or Sean Colmes, these are people that are extremely high profile and are probably afraid. My parallel in my mind is Jeffrey Epstein, because he also had a lot of videos or alleged videos that that exposed a lot of high profile individuals. They say actors and politicians and who knows who. And mysteriously, video surveillance was.
I mean,
cut
Chris,
off.
do you think there's any chance we see an Epstein situation here if he does in fact have the goods on people who are bigger or more powerful than him? Is that something you'd be concerned with?
I would most certainly be concerned with it. It's crossed my mind, only because I guess I'm a little bit cynical in a lot of ways. You know, just like we were talking about the muddying the waters with defense attorneys speaking. You know, truth is a very unusual word these days. You know, all you have to do is say, that's fake news, and all of a sudden there's a question mark thrown up, or you have to just sow a seed of doubt. But I would be, you know, if it were me and I had the level of fame and history that goes back with Sean Colmes, I'd be concerned for my own safety. I don't know. I guess we're all guessing here. But, you know, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, or did he? Do we know? I mean, that's the question mark. I think that's still being litigated, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, I think that's going to be litigated in the court of public opinion from here to eternity, right? But Andrew, back to you. Bigger, what is it? Big girl for life. Is that what it says? It's hard to read. These are like reading license plates. I always say that. I'll be sitting in that courtroom in 2025. If you can get in, I think this is probably going to be the most high profile case New York City has ever seen. I may go up there. They hopefully will have some sort of media overflow room, and we'll check that out. So just back to some of this back and forth, Andrew, between related to this witness in question, this grand jury witness. Diddy's attorneys say that it is a quote unquote pathetic extortion scheme, and went on to say this witness, who has never even met Mr. Colmes, claims that he received the tapes from an unnamed individual who was subsequently shot and killed, along with a purported memoir of the deceased mother of Mr. Colmes' children that has since been denounced as fake. He's talking about Kim Porter there. But are these like shots across the bow to the feds, like back off? Or again, what is their major concern with this witness in particular? That's question number one. And question number two is, he's really already lost in the court of public opinion. I mean, he's convicted in the court of public opinion. How hard is that to overcome for him?
Yeah, I think that it's all a PR game. And so then you have to get a little bit deeper into why somebody's playing a PR game in the way that they are. Are they trying to communicate to the jury? Are they trying to essentially taint the jury pool to create some sort of underlying reasonable doubt or kind of an alternate theory? I don't see that so much here. You know, they're trying to be aggressive. I'm sure that Sean Colmes wants an effective and very aggressive defense team. He seems like the personality type that would demand that. You also look at him, and it would be hard not to conclude, kind of as an armchair psychologist, that he's got some grandiosity and some narcissism going on there. And so is this just to say it that this is what's satisfying him? And so there's a certain kind of feeling that he's getting based on putting that out there. I think that the bigger issue is this. There seems to be very strong allegations that the government has already against him, although not in the quantity that we're seeing in the media and on TMZ. We have this subsequent grand jury going on, and we can assume that there's going to be some degree of a superseding indictment that includes more allegations. But when you compare what the feds have, and even with what we're kind of projecting the feds may have, and you compare that against what's coming out of Texas and some of these civil personal injury lawyers with allegations that seem potentially a bit more far-fetched. And I don't want to call into doubt anything other than to the extent that the Constitution protects the presumption of innocence in these cases, you do have to wonder if there is some possibility that some folks are going for a money grab. They found themselves at a P. Diddy party one time 20 years ago, or they found themselves in a bit of a vulnerable situation. They took drugs with P. Diddy because they wanted to at the time, and now they can reframe that. And I would think that to somebody like P. Diddy, especially those allegations that might be exaggerated, confabulated, or downright untruthful, that he would have a very strong reaction to that. So maybe if you really are trying to read between the lines, you're finding that those reactions are coming with the things that he and his defense team actually think that there's a good defense to, versus some of these other things that they seem to be a lot more silent about.
Well, I'm going to jump in and advocate for Tony Busby. Not because I know the man, because I don't. But I will say this. He did say in many of the press conferences that he is carefully vetting every single one. He's brought on an investigator to try and verify these claims, because at the end of the day, this is affecting his payday. If he puts forward a victim who is not really a victim, that is a civil lawsuit that's not going to go anywhere. And that's a bunch of work that is not going to, there's not going to be a return on his investment.
Well, so no, he's looking for a settlement on these, is what he's doing. He's promoting the nature of the allegation without dropping names, and then he's running to Hollywood to see how much money he can get to try to get a hush money payment. And that's a real problem under the law, because trying to settle with a hush money payment on a sexual assault allegation is something that's generally prohibited, both in New York and California. And so he's creating a whole mess for the Fed. So I agree, but also I am.
Well, that's super interesting. I didn't know that. So, I'm a little skeptical too, and I've said this before on the show, but he's wealthy enough to afford to buy. He bought himself a tank that sits on his front lawn. So do you have that, which is interesting. But look, when I first saw him, I thought that he was kind of on the up and up, but obviously there's tons of money to be made here. But Andrew, back to the point you just made, about how there's laws against this, about this hush money, or these hush money arrangements. What is the potential, I guess, conflict here legally? Does Busby, does he face potential legal issues himself by doing this?
Well, so the laws essentially prohibit you from engaging in a non-disclosure agreement where you prevent someone from reporting or testifying to criminal activity. It can even be pierced by investigators that could subpoena somebody to come in and force them to testify. So the way that they're writing these, I don't know. I mean, we don't know the details of it, and we don't know exactly what the nature of the allegation is. Perhaps the allegation is somewhere less than criminal and much more of a civil type of issue going on here. There, for example, in California, if you want to engage in one of these kind of settlement agreements to avoid criminal prosecution or avoid participation, it has to have been a misdemeanor in the first place. It has to be approved by a court. So I'm more raising the question as to exactly what's going on behind the scenes, but it certainly seems that he is making generic allegations or unnamed allegations and then reaching settlements that seem to suggest that those allegations aren't going to come forward. But if I were at the DOJ right now, I would be subpoenaing those records absolutely, and finding my way into the details of that. We also have to remember this is a RICO case. So the allegations need not actually be that each one of these is a criminal act, but that it was in furtherance of the general criminal plan that was here. So I don't like it. It stinks to high heavens to me. I want the prosecutors focused in on this case. I want them to prove what they can prove. I want a verdict that's fair and just. And then if we need to deal with the civil angle of it, that's fine. But I don't like it at this stage.
I think that's really well said. Yeah. Chris, jump in, and then Melba.
I'm sorry. I think both can be true. I think what happened I think there are people trying to get just this money grab. I agree that some of those people are. It seems very likely to me, but I think the impetus for this deluge of litigation is because Sean Combs denied having assaulted women, and in particular the I can't remember the person's name. I apologize. The one we saw on the video in the hotel lobby.
Cassie Ventura.
Cassie Ventura. That right there. His public credibility has been tarnished. So if anybody can come out and say he did this and he did that to me, Sean Combs will deny it, and all people have to do is go back to what they saw on in that video footage, and they'll say, well, he's denying it, but is he lying about it? Is he not lying about it? I think both can be true. I think that the federal case, because in my experience, and I'm not a litigator or a lawyer, it appears that the feds usually don't bring cases until they are pretty sure. They have a lot of evidence. They've dotted their I's and crossed their T's. And usually they have answers to the questions they're going to ask before they ask them. These other civil cases, I think, are a bandwagon. I'm not saying all of them because I don't know. But it seems that it's likely that at least some of them are trying to get that settlement. I mean, $50,000, $100,000, $1 million, I don't know, is probably better than nothing, just for bringing it up. And why this civil attorney would bring all of these cases, I think of the shotgun approach. You try for 100 cases. If you get 10 of them, you still win, because it's pretty formulaic at this point. Filing these suits. That's just.
I mean, Melba, what I don't like about that, and I'm going to let you jump in, is, and you're defending Tony Busby, which I love.
But strange, but that is.
Yeah, it is. But I don't know. I have a problem because, to Andrew's point, these are a certain type of case, SA cases, some of them involving minors. So I feel like, if at least if they want it disclosed, it should be able to be disclosed. But look, I'm being admonished by Moon Goddess. Can we please hear from the only woman on the panel? Melba, the floor is yours.
So listen, I always come at this from the perspective of the survivors, okay? Because there are real people who have been violated 10 different ways from Sunrise. So let's not forget that as we have this discussion. There'll be a couple folks who, they're being shady. They're trying to get a payday. Absolutely. But the vast majority of people who report a sexual assault are telling the truth. It's only like in maybe 30% of cases do you have someone that is falsely reporting. And there's usually, there's a solid motivation behind it. Maybe it's, there's a relationship and you're upset it's over, or it's a money grab or whatever. But the vast majority of times that somebody reports a sexual assault, they're telling the truth, especially men. Because men never like, as the only woman on this panel, men generally are very ashamed to admit that they've been violated in this way. They feel it's an attack on their manhood, which they shouldn't, because again, somebody did something to you without your consent. So I just want to center the survivors here and the folks who have gone through hell and back and are going to have to get up in a courtroom and tell the story of probably the worst day of their life. Let's not forget them.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. And we do advocate for victims here at STS. And look, if you were on the receiving end of any of this Diddy stuff, it is definitely without question altered your life and the way you look at life forever. So repercussions need to be paid for that kind of behavior if in fact it proves to be true in a court of law. The bearded lady here, we're going back to Andrew. This is a specific question, but I'm going to widen it out a little bit. Do you think Diddy can be charged with child abuse of his own children if they were participating in freak-offs while under the age? I know there have been some allegations that some of his kids were around. I don't know if they were underage, but you mentioned a superseding indictment. What other types of additional charges, and you've got a lot of experience here, do you think we could see coming down the road? I'll hold it there, but I've got a lot of questions for you.
Yeah, I love this question from the bearded lady. I think that it's right on point. You can charge a child abuse allegation if you expose a child to kind of the presence of criminal activity. And so even if they aren't directly involved in the freak off, but they're in a room where drug use is going on, or there are weapons that are in the room in a unsafe manner, or there are people who are untrustworthy, even if there's certain sexual activity that's happening in a fashion that they weren't properly supervised. Those are all feasible avenues to charge a person. Now, keep in mind, the criminal case here is on the federal side. So federal law typically is going to require that it be some sort of interstate crime. But again, one more layer of that is that it's a RICO case. And so RICO cases, the charge is the RICO, the essentially the organized crime enterprise. And so the activities that go into that organized crime don't have to be actually individually proven, and they don't have to be individually charged. You can kind of generally throw that out and pick a few along the way, perhaps the strongest ones, and you kind of lean back on the larger RICO charge and don't get bogged down in the details. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into how to charge this, but it's the RICO charge here that lets him that'll allow the video of the hotel assault that goes on, even though that's outside the statute of limitations and not something that would fall under federal law, still going to be a criminal act or criminal activity in furtherance of the organization's criminal intent or the criminal plan, essentially. So lots of these details, many of them don't have to be pled and can just kind of come in at trial.
That's going to be wild. It's going to be wild to watch. Melba, back to you. So Kim Porter, at one point, it was all over the media that she had, she died. She passed away apparently from some illness, which now some people are questioning the veracity of that. But coupled with the fact that a memoir was released called Kim's Lost Words: A Journey for Justice from the Other Side, which was a book that was purportedly based on a collection of diary entries. Well, that book was now it's been removed from Amazon and I think bookstores, if it was even in bookstores. It was a 60-page book, and it was authored by a producer, a guy named Todd Christopher Guzzi, under the pseudonym Jamal Millwood. It was published just on September 6th. So, I mean, isn't this an example of, this sounds like it was basically just completely fabricated, right? To either make money or mess with Diddy or both. So, there's got to be some due diligence by the defense team here, which is what I think they're doing. My whole thing is, and Andrew said it earlier, you want to make sure it's a fair and just verdict here. Right now, it seems like that's going to be super hard to get because of the incredible media bias against him, including shows like this. Look, we're talking about all this information. Anyone as a potential juror is going to watch this and think that Diddy is a monster, which he very well might be, but he hasn't been convicted yet. So how do you square all that?
Yeah, so the way you square all of that, number one, is in jury selection. So you start to inquire if each of the jurors, first of all, are you a survivor of SA? Is someone close to you a survivor of SA? Because right there, you're not going to be the ideal juror for this type of case because it's going to be traumatic. Are you somebody who, again, you have a preconceived notion? You're coming into this, you're like, you know what? I saw the Cassie video. That's it. Diddy's guilty. There's nothing you could tell me that would make me change my mind. Yeah. You're out. You're not going to be a good juror on this case. So both the defense and the prosecution are going to be asking very pointed questions as much as they're able to, because again, in the federal system, jury selection is way different than in the state system, but there might be more of an avenue for them to inquire more about the feelings, or maybe the judge might be the one to inquire of the jury panel about their feelings about Diddy and whether or not they can be fair and impartial. And I think the other thing too would be a change in venue. That's been kind of floated a little bit out there, which would mean the trial would be moved from, one of the 5 boroughs to maybe somewhere in upstate New York. I'm thinking Buffalo, Rochester, someplace where just because of the fact that Diddy was not part of the fabric of that community the same way he has been in New York City, where people have seen him at clubs and restaurants. So it's like, am I going to judge my neighbor as opposed to somebody in, again, I'm not picking on, I'm sure
Yeah.
they're lovely places, but you know, they're up there, they have never seen him, they may know him from, you know, his albums or something like that, but they may not have any preconceived notions. So that's probably how you're going to get the most fair jury to result in the most fair verdict.
This is I mean, Andrew, before I get to this comment real quickly, I mean, how often do the feds have a change of venue? I would imagine it is next to never.
You can't really compare this case. So it does not happen often. It especially doesn't happen where you have a venue that has a really large populace to it, like you do in New York. But it happens, and there's legal standards for it. And Diddy is an interesting case for it because of the degree of his popularity. The question is, with that degree of popularity, is he more or less likely in a different venue to have people more or less informed? And I think that the information or the taint that a jury might have would be about the same anywhere across America.
Melba, my little spies told me you have to be off at 6:30. Is that right?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Oh, you have. So we have 2 minutes to get your final thought. One thing that's interesting is this comment, and then if the other guests can stick around maybe for another 10 minutes or so, I'd love to keep you guys here. But Sarah Boone's jury, I was at that trial. Now, this is a case of a woman who zipped her boyfriend into a suitcase and left him to die, suffocating in there. And then the defense came in and used battered spouse syndrome defense, saying that it was, years of abuse from him. They were both alcoholics. It failed miserably, and she got convicted in 90 minutes. But I was stunned. I'm not a lawyer. And in jury selection, a woman who was, being voir dire said, look, I'm going to be a witness in my ex-husband's DV case. I was a victim of his abuse, and he's going to be on trial. And they chose her. And I thought that was a sure, juror for the defense here, someone that could. But then someone said, but no, because a real DV victim will be able to sniff out someone who's making things up. That's exactly what happened. So,
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, in this case, something similar could work, right?
maybe not, because again, we have to think about, when was this incident? Was this something that happened last week? Was it, when I'm talking about, let's say, the domestic violence incident with this particular juror in the Sarah Boone case, is this something a month ago? Is this something that happened 5 years ago, and now it just happened to wind its way through the court system and now it's coming to trial? But I think, again, this was a strategic move by the prosecution, because they knew that the defense was going to advance the theory of a battered person syndrome or battered person's experience, and they knew that, or felt that, this was false. So they felt that this juror would be ideal because she could educate the rest of the jury, because sometimes that's what happens in the jury room. You have that exchange of experiences, and that discussion is how the jurors get to a verdict. So I think they kept her on strategically, but it can be a risk. So again, especially when you're dealing with sexual assault, if this is something that's fairly recent, or that could be too traumatizing for that juror. But if this is something that maybe happened 20 years ago and they've worked through it, and they have expressly said they can put that aside and be fair and impartial, then they may be right for this particular case. It all depends.
The chat is collectively saying, don't go, Melba, but I've got to let you go. And I know you'll be back with us hopefully next week. Always an awesome guest. Thank you for being here, Melba.
Thank you. Take care, y'all.
See you next time. So, Chris, to you on something that I'm curious about. You're talking about this a little bit previously, but the question here, in the MDC, the Metropolitan Detention Center, and soon to be, if he's convicted, in a federal prison, do you think Diddy will be a target or a hero within the prison system, or could it be both? But will someone try to get at him?
I think it's both. I mean, there's people are still discussing who shot Tupac Shakur and who shot Christopher Wallace. They're still talking about that, and some of it is coming out. There are a lot of interviews that I've heard that are talking about how it's possible Sean Colmes was behind some of it, and there's also a lot of gang activity that went on, years ago and even today. I would say it's going to be both. he's probably he's very popular person. There's no doubt about that, which goes to the venue issue. I mean, I can't imagine there's any place in the United States that somebody never heard of Sean Combs or some of his music or some of his his proteges. I most certainly think it would be both, and I would say that he, I'm only guessing because I have no way to know for sure, but I would say he's probably going to, be in some level of danger because of his past. I mean, that's how I opine on the subject.
Yeah, I think it's going to fall somewhere in the middle there. But if I'm Sean Diddy Combs and I'm in the MDC either right now where he is or going to federal prison, I'm going to be looking over my shoulder. That's for damn sure. Kathleen coming to us from New York City. So Andrew, to you, there's also the defense is kind of covering all its bases because now it kind of screamed out at the feds for or at the judge for wanting a gag order on this witness, but now they're kind of yelling and making hay with the government again. They had accused them of leaking information before, but now they're doing it again. And here's the direct quote: "The government has been investigating for nearly a year, and as they are aware, their own allegations about freak-offs do not relate to men at parties or alleged underage victims." It's a bold statement to make when there have been all these allegations to the contrary. Again, is this like a, to make an analogy, like a brush-off pitch in baseball where they're just trying to, get the feds to back off a little bit? Is that what's really going on here?
Yeah, I don't know what the defense is doing, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with them. It's really hard to second guess what a defense team is doing, and I'm not Sean Combs' defense attorney, so I don't want to defend him. I do have to say that any case has to be proven in court beyond a reasonable doubt on each charge and each element of every charge. And that's a difficult thing to do. And there's rules of evidence and there's procedures and certain legal issues that come up along the way. And I have no doubt that what the defense wants to do is make sure that they are protecting every legal issue they possibly can, because it looks like he's going down, right? He's going to get convicted. It's going to be a long sentence. This is going to be a nightmare for him. And then there's going to be a round of appeals. And can they find something along the way where they're complaining or even whining about what's happening that essentially sends it all back down? We saw Bill Cosby's case get tossed. We saw Harvey Weinstein's case get returned for essentially a second trial. That's still pending at this point. So I have no doubt that the defense attorneys are trying to raise every little thing they can along the way. When they start to get into the weeds like that, like, oh, well, the indictment didn't say that there were men involved, knowing that there's a superseding indictment that's likely to drop any minute that may have those allegations, all of a sudden make them look like fools along the way. They've got some credibility concerns that I think that come up with the boldness of their statements. I would, if I were in their position, I would issue flat, denials or generic statements, focus in on the court dates, focus in on the trial, and try this case on each individual charge instead of potentially losing credibility at this stage.
Chris, back to you. People keep saying, well, some big names are coming out. Even Tony Busby, the lawyer in Houston, who Andrew was talking about, has teased that / threatened that. What's your opinion? I mean, you're sort of a lay person here, not an attorney like myself, but do you think we're going to see other big name celebrities kind of come to the surface because of the story?
I don't know. I think the spectator in me wants to see what this list is, just like everybody else, like who's on this list. On the other side, you hear about how a lot of the people on this list will do anything to not be exposed if this list really exists. I'm not, to be honest with you, I have no idea. I think that some of these names will come out. I think this is different from, the Jeffrey Epstein case, where there was this infamous phantom list. We don't know who was on it, if there was even a list or whatever. Just to also go back to what Andrew said, we hear about defense attorneys talking and making these statements, but based on previous high-profile cases that we've all watched, very high-profile cases, it's a lot different what you say outside the courtroom than what you can say inside the courtroom. So I'm inclined to believe that the waters are being muddied, or at least that's the attempt to try to garner enough public opinion that maybe that overwhelming public opinion will kind of pressure what goes on in the courtroom. And that's from a non-lawyer point of view. That's just how it feels to me based on what I've seen. But regarding the list, I don't know. I wonder if these names will come out. I'd be curious to know. There are some people that have admitted, very famous people, to have been at these parties, but deny ever having seen it, anything untoward or illegal or whatever. I mean, who really knows? I mean, I'm wondering just like everybody else.
Yeah, time is going to tell on that one. A couple more questions for the panel, and then we'll get some quick final thoughts and get out of here. A quick reminder, in 22 minutes, we're doing a second show on the Delphi trial with 3 journalists who've been covering it. There's no cameras in that courtroom, so it's been a little tough to follow, but they're going to break it all down for us. 3 amazing guests, including Susan Hendricks and Lauren Mathias of Hidden True Crime, and Susan wrote a book on this trial. And by the way, tomorrow, Brian Kohlberger is in court trying to spare himself from a possible death penalty case. There's a hearing at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific. We're going to take that live. And Greg Sordid, who's a prominent defense attorney, has been covering the case out west. He's going to join us to give us analysis for that. And then we're going to do a Kohlberger wrap-up show tomorrow night. And then Phil and Scott are back, I hope, on Friday. Big overarching question, Andrew. I mean, the feds have something like a 98 or 99% conviction rate. I mean, how do you even defend against the federal government, even if you are a billionaire? They've got more money than you.
Yeah, I like that question because I don't think that it's the money that will drive the defense here. I mean, I'm paid by clients, rich and poor, all the time in my defense work on these sex cases. And my defense strategy isn't different based on how much money they have. You litigate hard and you ask the tough questions. You make sure that the government's going through the right steps and doing it all procedurally correct. And then you cross-examine as best you can, and you bring out any evidence that you can along the way. The feds bring cases that they can convict on. That's their tradition. And so you have to assume he's going down, but there are acquittals. And I've had many acquittals over the years against the federal government. I saw one of the questions come across, what's the strongest evidence right now? I wasn't trying to get ahead of you, but you look at what evidence we actually see right now and what evidence we think maybe comes down in a superseding indictment. That video of the assault in the hotel of Cassie is undeniably criminal, but it's a domestic violence. It's an incident of domestic violence captured. And by the time he gets to trial, he'll probably have served all of the time that he would get from a domestic violence conviction for something like that. And so what we're looking for is what's the evidence of the human trafficking? What's the evidence of these, the enterprise of these ongoing SAs that are alleged to have occurred here? And that gets much deeper into the weeds. Each case, each alleged victim, each incident, because as immoral or as improper as it may be from a societal perspective, we have to look at what the law limits. It limits non-consensual sex, for example. It limits sex with people who cannot consent. There's other legal theories that are out there, but you can kind of walk down a path where you could see defense counsel effectively arguing that some people like to party, some people like to engage in orgies or kind of this wild sexual behavior, and some people like to mix drugs with that, and that actually makes it more fun. And some people do it even though they wouldn't usually do it, but they do it when they're impressed with the people who maybe are most interested, like a P. Diddy. And so you can really see how, if you break down each individual case, then you start to really question what the motives of the witness are, how good their memories are, how solid the allegation is that there perhaps was a freak off, but it might have been a legal freak off. And so I'm getting kind of way into it, but there's lots of ways to attack a case like this for the defense, even if the government has a very strong case.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I'm sure they're going to do all that. And maybe after watching this, their defense team watches this, they're going to hire Andrew and bring him on the case. We'll see. You never know.
I'm not sure I need that.
Chris Davila, first time guest here. I don't have your bio right in front of me, but he was a captain within the Department of Corrections in New York City. Chris, just want to thank you for being here. Love to get you back on as a best guest, and your final thoughts here in terms of Diddy's current situation. Real quick, what is his day like right now when he's not meeting with attorneys, and your final thoughts?
Well, usually attorney visits are, you can't limit attorney visits. When an attorney comes to see their client, I would imagine he's probably trying to spend as much time with his attorneys as possible so that he's spending less time in the incarcerated world. I would imagine his day is he wakes up at a certain amount of time. Days in prison and jail start early. Usually at around 5 o'clock in the morning is when they start serving food. Their services, whether they're going to programs or religious services or things like that. The day is typically a 6 in the morning till a 3 or 4 in the afternoon type of day. Lights out are at, fairly early in the evening. People get locked in to make sure that there's no violence in the middle of the night. I can't imagine. I would say in some substance, he's having a bad time of it. It's a long way from, the stories you hear about, sushi on nude party goers. This is, he's got 3 square meals a day and he's not sleeping on a very comfortable bed, I would imagine. He's hearing about the rampant violence at MDC. We're hearing about it all the time. Several people were murdered not long ago, if I remember correctly on the news, at MDC. There's a lot of
there was two over the summer within a 6-week span.
Right. And that can't be very comforting news for somebody facing their entire life in the federal prison system, because I will say protective custody and those kinds of things, that does not last forever. Eventually you're going to be into the general population. And I don't know how that's gonna bode for P. Diddy. Will he use some of his financial resources to buy some protection in there? Who knows? But I can't imagine he's having a very easy time of it.
Yeah, that's probably an understatement. Andrew Cherkasky, first-time guest. I hope he will be a frequent guest, like his Wisconsin style in New York. Don't let that Wisconsin leave you, Andrew. That New York City can be. I grew up in Jersey, right outside the city, and that place can beat you down and turn you into an angry, unfriendly New Yorker, which I actually love and miss. Chris, look at Chris, very nice, sweet guy. But Andrew Cherkasky is a former federal prosecutor, a military veteran. You heard he was a JAG. Was it the Navy? Did I get that right? Air Force, my bad. JAG in the Air Force.
Service, by the way.
Yes, thank you. Nearly 2 decades of experience. Now, of course, as you heard, working in New York City. Obviously, a very bright guy. One of the questions: how long do you expect a trial like this to last? What do you say?
2 to 4 months. I think it's going to be long. We got to see what the superseding indictment looks like. But it's not going to be a young thug trial type long, but it's gonna drag.
And COE, I hope I'm allowed to go to New York City for 4 months. Be a nice break from the kiddos. I'll have to get COE is the chief of everything, Andrew. She runs the show here. Also my wife. So 4 months
I have
away.
the same situation.
I think we all
do. My wife's my law partner as well. We work next to each other. She keeps me in line all day long.
Let me ask you this. Do you guys talk business? It's funny. My parents, my dad was a psychiatrist, my mom was a licensed therapist, and they worked together, but they had a rule, no talking about it in the bedroom. I'm not going to get personal, go inside your bedroom, but unfortunately, the COE and I have broken that rule many times.
Oh, no, we talk about everything constantly.
It's impossible not to.
So sometimes it's enough already. Sometimes I'm like, I don't have the capacity, and then she just tells me anyways. But yeah, always.
One other thing, real quickly, is the feds barked back at this notion of the gag order and said, look, Diddy's own family, including his mother, they were releasing statements to the media. So if they're allowed to do it, why can't their witnesses do it? And then Douglas Wigdor is a very well-known well-known employment. That's his primary area of expertise in New York City. But he was that was Susan Hendricks calling me. But he is defending or is Cassie Ventura's attorney, and he basically said a gag order is going to silence the victims, which is no bueno. So that's just one other thing I wanted to add. And Andrew, just your last thoughts on how this all kind of what is the next step in this long, arduous process. Also, trial's supposed to be in May. Is there any chance it happens that soon?
Trial's not going to happen in May, assuming there's a superseding indictment. I would be very surprised to see that, although the defense might have a strategy to demand a speedy trial to put the to make it more difficult for the prosecutors to get it organized in time. There's lots of details. I think the next big thing that's going to drop is the superseding indictment and the additional details that brings. I'll tell you, my kind of bottom line is that Diddy's going down for his dirty deeds. How hard and for how long and for how many of those deeds, I'm not sure, but I think that we all have to remember the Constitution presumes innocence. And so while it's fun to get into the details and into the weeds, we have to realize that it's the trial and the jury that make the final decision. And we have to kind of project what we're seeing now, how that might play out at trial, as opposed to deciding guilt now. It's just not how our Constitution demands. And so I like to kind of organize myself and my thoughts around that and play around with the facts and kind of the speculation in light of those constitutional demands.
Eloquently said. A final comment here. Would Andrew and his wife come on the show together in the future? She has an open invite. I would love to see that, actually.
Yes, I'd love to do that. She's much brighter than I am, and she'll put me in my place. All
right, there we go. It's going to happen. Thank you all for being here. Love you, New York City. Justice for all the victims here. Love you, America. It was a crazy night last night. Let's all be nice to each other and civil. That's all I can say. We'll see you in 10 minutes discussing Delphi. The fun never ends here at Surviving the Survivor. Whoop. And I just clicked something I shouldn't have clicked. And I'm stuck. All right, here we go. See you later.